Good morning. I am State Senator Michelle Benson. I chair the Health, Human Services, Finance, and Policy Committee for the Senate. And we had scheduled this press conference to talk about CCAP fraud and the resignation of 2 deputy commissioners. But as you are aware, Commissioner Tony Lourey resigned effective today. The governor did have some press comments about it, but we think it's important to continue this conversation as new leadership is going to emerge at the Department of Human Services. It's my understanding the governor is going to appoint an interim commissioner, and it would be my expectation that the culture at the Department of Human Services would change, that they would focus on accountability, transparency, and serving the taxpayers. Obviously, there's a significant cultural issue that is going to need to be remedied. I would encourage the governor to support his interim appointment by having private sector experts come forward to assist. We cannot have the same cast of characters if we hope for significant change in this department that serves 1 million Minnesotans, takes a significant portion of our budget, and has been entrenched as a bureaucracy that has failed over and over again. So it will be critical the governor follow the model he did with MNLARS, private sector experts to deal with human resources, technology, cultural change. It is time to move the problems out of the way. It was my hope that Commissioner Lourey would be the person to do that. We see that that's not the path forward, and so that would be my challenge to the governor and his interim commissioner. I look forward to working with her, and I've asked my staff to reach out to the governor's office to see how soon we would be able to meet so that I can be supportive and productive as we go through this leadership transition. And with that, I'm joined by 2 of my colleagues from the House, and I'm grateful for them to be here. Representative Mary Franson will speak next.
Good morning and happy Monday, everybody. So today's news is obviously very troubling, and we have real concerns about the leadership vacuum of DHS, and specifically in the Office of the Inspector General, which help prevent fraud in our public programs. So the Department of Human Services is responsible for serving and protecting the most vulnerable Minnesotans, but since Governor Walz has taken office, the department has been embroiled in chaos. Picture that puppy that you see as a GIF or a GIF, however it's pronounced, and it says it's fine, and meanwhile all around the puppy there's fire. Well, that's Governor Walz saying it's fine. Meanwhile, the Department of Human Services is under siege. The Inspector General is on paid leave. 2 top agency leaders are resigning, and now Commissioner Lourey has resigned. Leadership is top down, my friends. The chaos at DHS reflects a lack of focus by Governor Walz in assuring that Minnesota's disabled, elderly, and poor are taken care of and tax dollars are being used appropriately. This week will mark the 4 months since Carolyn Ham was placed on investigative leave by the Department of Human Services, and since that time, she has earned over $42,000, more than many Minnesotans make in a year. This is offensive to Minnesota taxpayers. They are upset, and that is why we should pass legislation that has been offered by Representative Tony Jurgens or a similar bill by DFL Representative John Hoyt that would limit the amount of time that taxpayers must foot the bill while state employees are on investigative leave. Once again, these are tax dollars. DHS has refused to offer any information on the status of the investigation, and Democrats in the legislature have refused to conduct any oversight. Twice, not once, but twice, they blocked our efforts to subpoena Ms. Ham and allow legislators to question her about the child care fraud and leadership at the OIG. Now here we are, 4 months later, we still don't have answers, and there is chaos at DHS. I like to say that DHS right now is a dumpster fire. With Chuck Johnson, who has served as acting OIG in Ms. Ham's absence, now leaving, we need to know from Governor Walz what the plan is to turn the page at the Inspector General's office to ensure it is fulfilling its mission to DHS. I have submitted to DHS a letter and data practice request seeking answers to these questions. I will have an updated request coming as a result of the sudden resignation that will cover emails and data over the weekend. You have a copy of the first request in your packet. Lastly, this turmoil is yet another reason we need to take the advice of our nonpartisan legislative auditor and make our Inspector General an independent entity. And now you get to hear from Leader Daudt.
Well, thank you all for being here this morning. I wish, obviously, things were going better at DHS, but unfortunately, there's been some turmoil in the last few weeks, and particularly, obviously, over the weekend. We were very alarmed to hear that the commissioner was resigning this morning. We probably assume that that is appropriate and that there are things going on at DHS that warrant that resignation. I think it's time now that Minnesotans know what those reasons are. We're calling for more transparency. We want to know exactly what's going on at DHS. We have the top 3 officials at DHS who have now exited. We have the Inspector General who has been on administrative leave for 4 months without an investigation actually starting into her performance. To me, that's mismanagement of the highest level. And frankly, it's too early in the Walz administration to have a scandal of this size. So it's time that the Walz administration is transparent and honest with Minnesotans about what is going on at DHS. This is frankly a very large part of the budget, second largest state agency, or probably largest state agency, but second largest piece of the state budget, 41% of the state budget. This is a big deal, and it impacts about 20% of Minnesotans who rely on DHS for services. We know that there is fraud at DHS. Everyone knows that. It's not about whether or not there is fraud at DHS. It's about how much is there. What we know that needs to happen is an investigation into where that fraud is and what we can do to curb that fraud. What we're going to be looking for in the next commissioner of DHS is a reformer. We want somebody who's going to roll up their sleeves, dig in, and make sure that the tax dollars that are being spent in DHS are being spent wisely, efficiently, and effectively. We want to make sure that people get the services they need from the state of Minnesota, but that we're not wasting money. And it comes a time when fraud is overlooked enough that Governor Walz will own that fraud. So if he does nothing to fix the fraud, he becomes part of the fraud. And we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. We want to make sure that we curb the fraud. I'm sure that Governor Walz would agree that we don't want fraud in our DHS programs. But you can't say that you don't want fraud in DHS and then look the other way when it's happening. 4 months of not investigating what was going on with the Inspector General, having her on administrative leave, $42,000 worth of salary with no investigation into what was going on is shocking. So we want to make sure that from this point forward, what we want to see is transparency. As I said, I assume that the commissioner's resignation was appropriate. I don't know what was going on, but it appears when you have the top 3 people in the largest state agency that obviously there was a scandal that warranted this resignation. So what we want to know now is what caused this to make sure that we can prevent this from happening again. So with that, we'll take some questions.
Can I ask Senator Benson? You worked pretty closely with Commissioner Lourey, both in the Senate and as commissioner on a lot of the same issues. Can you describe that relationship a little bit and how you thought he was doing in the job, and then whether you were surprised by this?
We had a functional working relationship. He did reach out to me as the deputies were resigning last week. I didn't get a heads up about this. This, I'm sure, is very difficult for him. I had hoped that he would be a transformative leader. It might just be the case that DHS is too big of an entrenched bureaucracy, even for somebody with Tony Lourey's experience, to transform. And so there have been proposals in the past, both Republicans and Democrats, to break up DHS. There have been proposals that there should be an oversight board of some type because it is just too big. And I will tell you, as a legislator, there are a number of employees over there that when you ask them for something, sort of pat you on the head and tell you you just don't understand, and they wait for the next commissioner, next legislator to come forward. I think there are fundamental problems at DHS.
Sheriff Benson,
What would be the logical divide or split up of that department if you were going to split it up?
Well, I advocated for taking the Office of Inspector General out so they would be independent, direct care and treatment to be separated out from many of the health care aspects. There are other people who wanted child protection separated as well. And so there is a path forward does create more commissionerships and more high salaries. But if it is necessary for reform, if you look at how small deed is compared to what direct care and treatment would be, maybe we need to refocus. And that's why I would advocate for the governor to get private sector experts to come in. We have had the usual cast of characters. I have been on more healthcare task forces than I care to think about. And they never come up with actual reform. They just come up with another program to pile on top of an existing program. And so I think it's time for us to take a radical look at the way the Department of Human Services is structured, the culture at Human Services, because obviously accountability isn't part of what they do every day, or we wouldn't have the problems we have with OIG.
When you say private sector, are you proposing, or do you think they should look at privatizing some of the services?
I think there might be things that could be privatized, but as we bring in this transitional commissioner, there are private sector experts who know how to do things better than the people at DHS, who will take a fresh look, a different look. And we don't do that as a habit in government. But we saw it was highly successful with MNLARS. And sometimes we need to step out of our comfort zone. Government is not always the answer for everything. And this is a great opportunity for the governor to attempt to take a victory lap on something that will be a stain if, as Leader Daudt said, the fraud continues and the dysfunction continues. It will be very difficult for him to not own this.
The governor today said he didn't think this shakeup was connected to the fraud in the CCAP program. Any thoughts on that?
My point would be there is a cultural problem at the Department of Human Services, and regardless of how it's manifesting itself, if there is a fundamental problem with the organization that doesn't require accountability, transparency, and the protection of taxpayer dollars and the people they're supposed to serve, you're going to see problems crop up in all sorts of places.
Would you, if the governor asked you to serve as commissioner, would you do that?
The governor's not going to ask me to serve.
That would be great, though.
I think that might make news. No, the governor won't ask me. I will help in any way I can, but that is not my role.
Speaker Daudt, or Leader Daudt, if you can just address the fraud that you said is, you're certainly suggesting that it's widespread. I mean, what evidence do you have on that?
You know, I didn't suggest that it was widespread, but literally our nonpartisan legislative auditor in audit after audit after audit of program after program has found real fraud at DHS, and what we get is just kind of stonewalled every time we want the agency to look into and dig in deeper and ensure that there is no fraud. Almost to the point where they're denying or disagreeing that there could be fraud. It's not a question of whether there is fraud. There is fraud at DHS, and we have the nonpartisan legislative auditors reports that show that time and time again in program after program. In fact, there's many people that think it's much larger than what the legislative auditor has found. What we want are answers, and if there is no fraud, then prove it. Right? If there is no scandal behind the resignations of these 3 people, then be transparent and prove it. Let's know everything that there is to know about why this is happening. Why for 4 months did they not investigate the Inspector General and her performance while they've had her on leave? Why did it take 4 months for that? And now today the governor says that they've started that investigation because you all asked about it, I assume, right? Why did it take 4 months to start that? And if these resignations have nothing to do, I mean, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we had the person who's filling in as the acting Inspector General resign as well from DHS. So we can't say that there's not a connection between these resignations and the fraud at DHS. The connection is very direct. We have one Inspector General on on investigative leave. We have the acting Investigator General now who has resigned from the department. My hope is now that and I don't know what the scandal is that's happening at DHS that's causing these resignations, but my hope is now that Commissioner Lourey has resigned, that hopefully those 2 folks that resigned last week would reconsider and stay, if it's appropriate. If the scandal is big enough and there's a problem where they all need to go, all the leadership needs to go, and somebody needs to have the courage, and hopefully Governor Walz does, to say, let's shake this whole thing up and let's start from scratch. Because this department is responsible and impacts enough Minnesotans' lives that we can't just look the other way. we have to address it.
That the dismissal of the Inspector General was in fact a reaction to the lack of adequate policing of that. The governor said today CCAP situation is not acceptable. No one in state government took money, but private businesses did, and we were negligent in stopping that in a clear manner. So, I mean, you can complain about the 4 months, but isn't the fact that they got rid of her, or attempting to get rid of her, in fact, a step in saying that we didn't do a good job and we need to do a better job?
Two things. One, it took them months to actually acknowledge an investigation was ongoing, while we as the taxpayer representatives all believed there was an investigation ongoing. I asked regularly and was told it's a personnel matter. We're continuing to work through it. Secondly, I had a bill that we passed off the Senate floor to make the OIG independent, appointed by the governor, 6-month term, confirmed by the Senate, so they would be independently accountable. House Democrats wouldn't move on it, wouldn't give at all, because everybody's interested in protecting the status quo. And until the governor decides the status quo is going to change and joins with us to say the status quo has got to change, DHS is going to continue to have these problems. The OIG is a symptom of an underlying problem.
So in response to your questions about this, they, and I'm not sure who they is, but you probably got pretty good access, they told you that this wasn't really related to anything like CCAP, or that they just want you to assume that it's just a personnel matter?
So are you talking about the resignations or the Carolyn Ham investigation? The Carolyn Ham investigation, when I inquired, they said it's a personnel matter. We have to be careful about what we say publicly because this could get into difficult legal territory. And I respected that. As someone who understands that we don't want to make things worse by making public comments, I respected that. At no time did they say, we're not doing an investigation. And now I find out from the press that they weren't doing an investigation. And the leader points out the governor today said, oh, yes, there is an investigation. So the press should find out when the investigation actually started. And I think Representative Franson's exactly right. There needs to be fundamental change in the way we treat employees who are under investigation. They should not be drawing their whole salary. We can withhold till the investigation is done, but this is ridiculous. And I don't know if there's a union standing in front of this that's slowing everything down. That would be another good question. As long as we're digging into this, let's go all the way, because if we're going to solve this problem, that's how hard the work's going to be.
Would you say the same thing for police officers under investigation? I mean, there's a due process of employees under investigation that, from your side of the aisle, we've heard come up time and again, that you need to innocent until proven guilty.
Yep. Fine, then have an investigation, but I think I think taxpayers looking at $42,000 being spent and no investigation going on
They want that job.
are enraged.
So
And-
should police
and
officers
so-
get paid when they're on
If you guys
administrative
want
leave?
to drag this into something else, if you don't want to talk about DHS anymore, that's fine. But right now, we are talking about state employees.
Police officers are public employees.
They're not state employees. Every municipality can make their own decisions.
You know, I think we do respect due process, and we want to, I don't think any of us has a problem with her getting a paycheck while she's being investigated, until it's proven that she was either negligent or, you know, there's some resolution to the investigation, she's either dismissed or placed back in that position. But ultimately, what happened was 4 months went by where she drew a paycheck where no investigation happened. That's the problem. That's the problem. Nobody was investigating. Nobody cared. And she just kept drawing a paycheck. That's the problem here.
That's what taxpayers are upset about.
And you know, I was confirmed for me this morning with Commissioner Franson in a telephone conversation that, and I think his exact quote was, very recently began, which tells me it either began today or last Friday. That, you know, 4 months went by with no investigation. And nobody apparently was paying any attention to whether this investigation had started or not from above, from the Walz administration. Commissioner Franz told me this morning when I asked him. He called me this morning to give me a heads up that this resignation was coming. We that conversation led into Ms. Ham and the lack of an investigation, and he said it has started now, although it was very recent, was the way that he said it to me on the phone, which leads me to believe it's literally hours or days that investigation has just started.
Carolyn Ham herself.
Right, yeah. I mean, and I don't think that's in dispute. The governor said this morning in his press conference that the investigation has started. So we know now it has. The fact that they haven't told us when it started leads us to believe that it just started, which means 4 months have gone by with her getting paid with no investigation. And I think that's just mismanagement at the very top level.
So you've got the Ham investigation, you've made it very clear, 4 months, nothing's happened,
Right.
she's getting paid. And then you've got these top resignations, and then you've got Commissioner Lourey's resignation. What if they are unrelated and the resignations are about personality disputes, people not getting along, and things like that? How does this all fit in your mind?
We're not going to judge why this has happened until we know the facts. But that's what we're here saying is we believe that we want to know the facts, we need to know the facts, and we believe that Minnesotans deserve to know the facts. When you have the top 3 people in an agency resigning within the course of 7 days or whatever it is, that's a big deal. This is a big scandal very early in the Walz administration. We need to know the details of why this has happened. This is the largest state agency responsible for 40% of the budget that impacts the lives of 20% of Minnesotans. And the top 3 people at the agency have now left. This is a scandal. Let's figure out what's caused it. Why it has happened, how we navigate out of here so that we can ensure that the Minnesotans who need and deserve these services are getting them and that there's no money being wasted that shouldn't be wasted. Those are the priorities, and that's what we want to make sure is happening. And I agree with Senator Benson and her assessment that maybe what we need to do is bring in some top business leaders from the private sector and have them sit on some sort of oversight board to look at the structure at DHS and make some recommendations on either restructuring the agency and also give us some feedback, I think, on exactly what has happened here in this situation.
Sometimes, can I ask you this? In the higher levels of government and business, sometimes resign means resign, and sometimes resign means you were fired. What do you think, just from what you've observed, what do you think happened here?
I'm not going to speculate. And the leader can't, but I'm not going to. I have worked with each of these individuals on a professional level, and I'm going to continue to respect them as professionals. If they want to talk about how this came to be, that's their prerogative. I am more interested in making sure that the entire Department of Human Services is held accountable and is better in a year, in 18 months. That is what I care about more than any of the other things that are going on, because it has failed over and over and over again. Taxpayer money is wasted and people are hurt. And it's time for the governor to grab the leadership and move this to a better place. And that's all I want in 18 months, for things to be noticeably, fundamentally better.
I would answer that by saying I think we all have been around here long enough to know that a commissioner never gets fired. It usually is a situation where a commissioner is asked to have a letter of resignation on the governor's desk by a certain time. I was told this morning that today was Commissioner Lourey's last day, which tells me this probably didn't happen this morning. It probably has been boiling up for a few days as a result of the other 2 second and third top people at DHS leaving within the last week. And I don't know that it is for us to speculate. We just want to know the answers. But I assure you that Commissioner Lourey didn't give up a Senate seat to serve as commissioner for 6 months. And I think this is one of the earliest departures of a commissioner in recent memory. And usually there's pretty significant circumstances behind a resignation when it happens like this. So we just want to know what those details are behind this resignation, why it's happening, why we had the 2 resignations last week, and furthermore, how do we deal with the fraud and waste and abuse and can we separate out the Inspector General's office? I think those are the things that we're concerned about right now. But this obviously is a big shakeup at DHS. It is a big scandal for the Walz administration, and I think Minnesotans deserve answers.
That's it for today, guys.
Thank you.